So after you have the deals done and you have the paper done, how do you make this stuff work for your startup? And when you think about the business on the physical side, you know, you think about big warehouses, right? This is physical supply chain, warehouses and people and things moving around and people lifting boxes. Hello? There we go. Digital supply chain is a lot quieter. You know, it happens with a bunch of guys who are wearing checkered shirts and glasses, sitting in a room somewhere in a basement in Burbank, as Mr. Creed will tell you, hacking away on a server farm that looks nowhere as cool as this to do that. But the thing that they have in common, both digital logistics and physical logistics, is that scale in this business requires some heavy lifting. And we're here today to talk about some of the heavy lifting that's required on data and some of the things that you didn't really know. So without further ado, I will let my panel introduce themselves. So if you want to take the mics out, talk a little bit about who you are, what you do, and I'm also going to ask you to say, was it you feel like pulling the sword from the stone? So why is data important to you? And why is data important to artists? And why is data important to the industry? Feel free to answer any of those questions after your intro. So we'll start.
I'm Alison Booth. I head up A&R administration for Sony Music Nashville. I am working with producers and our A&R department during the course of the recording process. I'm also collecting what we call metadata, which is data about data. Basically, in the physical, in the digital supply chain, what we're talking about now, instead of analog tape, which is what was used in recording studios for decades, we're talking about digital files, audio files. We also do videos, and those are also digital files. So I'm touching the actual audio and video files, but what I found to be just as important is data about those data files. So I am going to a lot of effort to collect data about the data files. You can't really sell the data files, the audio and the video, without metadata in some form. For example, we were talking about publishers. We have, for every single unit we sell, we have to pay publishers 9.1 cents. That's for one song. So we have to collect that metadata to know who to pay. I'm also collecting a lot of metadata about the performances themselves, which in the old days of physical product was really an important part of the process. This is the information that you would see in what we call liner notes. And when digital took off 12, 13, 14 years ago, there seemed to be a lot less interest in this particular kind of metadata, which, okay, so I'm a baby boomer, and part of my experience was sitting down, listening to an album, and reading those liner credits. I have nieces, they have friends. I used to buy CDs for my nieces when they were young. They would take out the CD booklet and throw it away, and throw away the jewel case and just listen. Yeah. So now what they do is buy from iTunes, and not a lot of call for digital liner notes. But to me, that was always a big, important part of my process. The digital liner notes are interesting to me. It seems to be not as interesting to younger consumers, but I think...
let's do a show of hands. Do you guys care about who wrote it, who played it?
See? Yay!
It does matter. I think that people are just not providing it the right way, and Alison is one of the leaders in collecting that information for Sony Nashville, so she's trying to fight.
Yes, I'm fighting the good fight. But another part of my job is actually getting those digital files and that metadata into our supply chain. And from there, it gets out the door, and Chris here makes sure that it gets out the door.
Hi, my name is Chris Reed. I'm with Sony DADC. I oversee shared services, digital operations. Sony DADC is a digital distribution company, amongst other things. I'm part of the music team and distribution. We support not only Sony with digital distribution, but Warner Music Group and EMI as well, so 3 of the 4 majors. My group specifically, what I do is I've got people who help with account startup, content distribution. I also have a business development role that I perform. My background is digital operations. I helped create Warner Music Group's digital operations group back in 2000 when there was no distribution or digital ecosystem. Metadata is important because it's good news, bad news. You can get out there, you can get your stuff into the ecosystem, but that doesn't mean you're going to be found. And if you're not out there the way you want to be, you're going to either not be found or your stuff's going to be misrepresented. So, you need to make sure that you take an active hand in that. I was listening to some of the earlier speakers, and Jeff said even if your product is your voice, it's still your product. And you need to form a team, as he said, and distribution is part of that team. Metadata is a part of distribution. So that's important, right? And leveraging what Ping said, when you do get your chance and you're going to go in front of somebody who you want to sign you, if you're an artist, you need to have thought through all angles of your plan, including not just marketing, but distribution, the logistics, the supply chain. It's going to be important to Ping and to others that you've thought through those back office aspects. Reporting's another thing. Reporting always gets to the left to the last. Oh, because it's reporting, it's easy. But it's not. And you need to have someone on your team that understands that and can help you through those.
Navigating the operational borders of ingesting a fire hose of information is critical to startups. So, as everybody needs their fifth beetle, as they say, to create, or they need somebody to add that flavor, somebody who understands the world of data that you need to collect as an artist is, and basically be able to deliver to digital storefronts is important. So that's where, we have the change from the record label to the distributor, and now we have a digital retailer, so you go.
Yeah, I've got one more thing to say. When you're forming the team, you want to work with people that are as passionate about their aspects as you are. Finance isn't my thing, but I dig working with people who are passionate about that. It's not my thing, but I want people that are coming just as hard at that as I am about digital operations, and you want to surround yourself with those type of people.
Hey, I'm Todd Jones. I work for Neurotic Media. I'm the VP of Operations, and what we do is we take the music after it's been sourced from the labels, and we provide a way for actual storefronts to receive the music. If you're iTunes or you're Amazon, then you work directly with the record labels. But if you're a smaller business or you're a startup, it's likely that you would work with a company like ours, where we have all of the record labels aggregated together, and then you can just receive all of the music from us. So if you are wanting to open a new storefront, or you have a new way to sell music, or a new idea to reach music consumers, and you need a place to get all of the music from, you come to us and we aggregate it all together.
So we're gonna start off a little bit with kind of getting into the basics. So the slide behind you, the giant slide that's glaring in your eyes, talks about kind of the core building blocks of what everybody needs to know about music metadata. And we get very heavily into acronyms in this side of the business. So we're going to cover just the basics right now. But if you see, there is a lot of initiatives going on the global level that are dealing with a lot of these enterprise level problems of scale in the business on a global basis, and there is we call it in-house the acronym salad sheet, but there's basically a sheet that details all the various metadata initiatives that are going on. Somewhere as a handout, I think it's a separate handout. It's a black and white one printed on a long piece of paper, so I'm not sure if you all have it. But that kind of details some of the things that are going on. So I want to start, just let's talk about the three, sort of the holy grail, right? ISRC, UPC, and then talking a little bit about ISWC and publishing information. So, and well, Isn't
What about grid?
yeah, right, there you go, right?
Right,
And
here
this
we
is
go.
the debate. But,
Right.
So let's talk about something we all can agree on,
Sure.
which is the ISRC code.
Absolutely.
So, Alison, you want to talk about what an ISRC is, and then anybody else can kind of pepper with some of your color commentary.
Okay. Well, an ISRC number identifies a particular recording. We assign it pretty early on in the process. You don't get paid from iTunes without an ISRC number. And major labels, I've been using ISRC numbers, I would say, since about 1990. An ISRC number is made up of different components. There is, for example, US, the country in which the recording was made. There's an owner's code, 3 characters long. And then there's 5 characters that are just sequential numbers. So every time you create a recording, you assign an ISRC number.
Give us a practical example, like of something you
Aretha
did.
Franklin respect. It's the example I always use. There's the original recording once. ISRC is like a fingerprint. It lives with that recording. It doesn't matter if it was originally distributed under, a Universal Music Group label and then moved to somebody else, then moved to somebody else. That ISRC is like a fingerprint. It lives with it through the life. It doesn't change. You talked about identifying your content and part of that registration process. You want ISRCs assigned to your works, or your recordings, more properly put, so that you're able to track that and then you're able to get paid. It's just as important as copyright. It's like a fingerprint. It travels with that recording.
Is it, I know the lightning that is Paul Jessup, the guy who created the ISRC, would strike me, but it's kind of like a social security number first.
It is. And it also needs to live in a registry. Here's part of what's happened to the ISRC number, and its entire methodology is going to change in 2014. For one thing, the Recording Industry Association of America assigns the owner's code. They ran out of owner codes in the, what is it now, 30, 20? Yeah. Yeah. But what happened in, the digital age is that in order to get something on iTunes, you have to have an ISRC number. So there are a lot of especially DIY artists. It's like, well, I have to have an ISRC number, so let me see. I don't understand how to go about getting one. I don't want to pay money to get an owner's code. So I'm going to just make up a number. And it might be a number that actually
It happens, surprisingly.
Yes,
There's
yes.
actually one company, who shall be nameless, but they chose to use the prefix TC, which is actually for the country, Turks and Caicos, and assign numbers that actually interfered with legitimate commerce entities. So,
Causes collisions.
So it's a rights collision of colossal proportions. So you have to be very careful. And the thing that you don't want to do is, you don't want to pee in the pool, because you screw yourself and you screw somebody else. So what you need to do is, if you're part of a legitimate, if you're an artist and you're part of a legitimate distribution network, so, as an indie label, if you're going through like the Orchard or something like that, or if you're an artist that goes through a Sony Music subsidiary, or going through ADA, or going through Red, or going through that, they assign ISRCs, and they can enable you to sign ISRCs. They'll sign an actual real one on your behalf. So if you're going through any of the kind of legitimate higher-end digital distribution companies, you'll be able to go through their distribution channels and be able to acquire a real ISRC.
Yeah.
And-
Sorry, just one more thought, and it's yours. The ISRC number is an international standard, ISRC. And these international standards organizations are trying to figure out, how do we improve this? How do we make this better? First of all, they dictate, after years and years and years of thinking about it, how, for example, an ISRC number, what the configuration of that number is. So what it is that's going to change in 2014 is you're going to have to register with an international registry. So you're really not going to be assigning your own ISRC numbers anymore. I don't know how that is with you, but we're still assigning our own now. But the day is coming, and it's been necessitated by, I think, the whole digital industry. We were assigning ISRC numbers to vinyl LPs, cassettes, CDs, all the tracks on those different product configurations. But the digital age has made it has allowed a mess to be made. So they're reining in companies from assigning their own ISRC. So you contact this international registry, they tell you what the ISRC number is going to be. There won't be any duplicates. You won't have two different ISRC numbers assigned to the same recording, or one ISRC number assigned to various different recordings.
The problems.
So nobody's being grandfathered?
No, it's not.
They
It's
are.
not wiping the slate clean. They're just trying to find a way to normalize it.
Yeah.
And we're going to definitely talk about
So
that.
there'll be one and only one.
We got to kind of speed it up a little bit because we're on the first slide. Like,
Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. I can talk about this.
me too. They only have 45 minutes.
No, I was just going to bring up how important it is because, a song and even an artist a song name definitely is nowhere close to unique. So if, you have, as an artist, if you have a song in the marketplace and you want to find out information about where that song is, you can't come to like a company like ours and say, I have a song that I put out last year called Just Dance, and I want to find out if you guys have it, how many it's sold, and all kinds of information, because we have 100 songs in our system called Just Dance, and obviously the example here is Lady Gaga, but you don't have to have a unique song name. But if you come to us with an ISRC and you say, I want to find out how much you've sold of my song, and here's the ISRC, that's really easy. We just type it into our system and we get back exactly your song. We make sure it's the right one, and you get all the information that you need.
You might have, for example, just to follow up on that, there is something, can we talk about ISWC right now?
Let's do UPC next, because that's kind of probably most common to some of the people who may be accepting deliveries right now.
Okay.
So UPC, ISRC is generally known as a track identifier. UPC is known as the product identifier, a grouping of one or more tracks, all inherited from the physical space and generally used to track digital products. Used to be intelligence in the UPC. It's a 12-digit numeric field. The 11th place used to be a configuration code. Six was digital. It's lost intelligence. For you guys, this can be really dry. We know that, but for me, I try to bring it back to relevance. Why you as a participant in this ecosystem should care, right? Just like with the ISRC, you want product identifiers on your products, because that's the language that's generally spoken from a reporting, tracking standpoint. Anybody who's reputable, above board, is going to use those. That's the communication that's used, the currency, if you will, that's traded.
And especially as we move more and more into digital, and the music industry moves more to digital, computers don't work in phrases and words. They work in ones and zeros. And so these unique identifiers can be broken down into ones and zeros that no one else has.
So Alison,
Well, you can think of, I can't talk about UPC anymore?
I just gotta go, I just don't want to get
Okay. UPC, you might recognize if you buy anything at a grocery store, anything, it's what's scanned. It identifies that product. It helps with any number of things. But the ISWC identifies the actual composition that's being recorded. So you may have one ISWC that is linked to, how many did you say, Just Dance, 100?
Yeah.
To 100 different ISRCs. The same song may be recorded over and over and over again. So you have to track the actual composition itself, which is owned by the publisher, and then the recording itself, which is owned by most likely a record company, some kind of, yeah. So one of the other issues, and this has really been true since digital began, is that you have this ambiguity with an artist name. You may have, and this is ISNI. Yeah, okay. Okay.
Slow down, Miss Lewis.
Just one question about ISWC. Is that issued by the same organization?
Now, here's the funny thing, it's not really widely used.
I was going to say, I've never heard
Yeah,
of it.
it's really used in Europe, and the GRD, the European, the Europeans, you would use it way more than the US. The US is interesting. So there's a lot of entities that help herd the cats on managing that stuff. Harry Fox Agency is one of the agencies that manages that stuff. There's another company called MRI who handles some of the aggregation of those rights and can kind of tell you who they are and navigate those things.
Is it a revenue stream you lose out on if you don't have an ISWC?
If you don't lose out on the revenue stream in the U.S., and I'm not sure about if it's required in European territories because I'm very U.S.-centric. So,
Well, the
ISRC and UPC, if you take away, if you only remember two of the three, remember ISRC and UPC.
yeah.
Because you will definitely lose out on revenue if you don't have those.
the ISWC is kind of like, depending on who you are, most of these companies report, like the Rhapsody report to Harry Fox Agency, who will then parse out some of the royalties on publishing, using their own algorithms, not a standard identifier, which kind of creates friction issues in itself.
So each track, digital track, needs a ISRC plus a UPC?
Not a track.
Well, if you're talking about a digital,
I would say yes, and here's why. You can have a one-track product.
Right.
So in that case, the track would have an ISRC. The wrapper that track is a UPC, right? But that UPC changes. Sorry, Alison. It will change. So you have a two-track bundle, two ISRCs for each, one for each track, and a wrapper, a product identifier, a UPC.
So as you guys developers building products, you have to understand that this is the myriad ways that data is going to come into your system.
so there's also something in this alphabet salad called a GRID, G-R-I-D, Global Release Identifier. And we always thought of UPCs and grid numbers. I mean, that applied in the days of physical product. When you're talking about digital product, you have to have what's called a grid number. It's a much longer number than, say, an ISRC number. I mean, we actually truncate it down to about 16 characters. But so the grid number in the digital world is going to identify the product. So you're going to have a grid number, and if you're talking about a long play with maybe 10, 11, 12 ISRC numbers linked to that grid number.
So we're going to jump into the next slide, and I encourage our panelists to look at the slide behind them. Basically, we're talking about business rules. So wholesale to retail mapping, variable pricing changing over time, the agency model, discount windows. Behind the scenes, some of this information is delivered along. So when a piece of music is delivered, right? When a ISRC and UPC is delivered with a digital file, right? The asset package is delivered through a distribution network to a retail partner. In addition to just having the data that you see, which is basically album, title, track, the consumer-oriented data. There's a whole list of stuff that goes on behind the scenes, sort of the ERN level data, which is kind of shorthand that these guys understand. So talk a little bit about kind of the DDEX level style data and what DDEX is. And Chris, you're the board member of DDEX, so I'll let you talk about DDEX, and then you guys can both chime in on kind of the detail of some of those particulars that also come in when you get a delivery of a product to your startup or service. Some of it may be applicable, some of it may not be.
So DDEX, Digital Data Exchange, it's seeking to standardize the exchange of information between different participants in the digital ecosystem. So you've got content owners, distributors, and distribution services, amongst others. But part of the standardization is around new releases. Bill mentioned ERN, stands for electronic release notice, and is the new release delivery format. So the music industry hasn't really had standards around distribution, and we make it very hard for our partners on the receiving end, folks like Todd at Neurotic and Digital Services, to receive and process that content. So it's standardization, common language. The DDEX ERN is a format. It's XML-based, standard format, standard information in standard places. Think of the DDEX ERN comparable to the banking industry and what the banking industry would be without standard protocols. Insurance. I want to launch a credit card, and I've got my own protocols, and I have to tell every merchant what my rules are. The music industry has existed that way for a long time, and I would suggest that the digital side inherited a lot of the sins from physical and then has been adding to that. But ERN, DDEX is standard communication, standard protocols, similar to what insurance, banking, travel has.
And Chris, is it easy to implement?
Yes, Bill, it is. Do it
It
once.
is?
Yes, it is.
So, that's something that we've been dealing with. We've been around for 12 years, and, only this last year has DDEX, the switch to DDEX really happened. And so previously, there was 4 major record labels, 5 before that, and each label would communicate its data in a different way, a different format. Each node of data would have a different name, even so small as like one label might send wholesale price and one label would just send price. And then one label has a price code. And so something that seems as simple as the price of an album would actually be communicated to a company in 4 different ways from 4 different record labels. And so one of the goals of DDEX is to standardize that. So at least this is the price. This is where I go look in the data structure for the price, and now I have a price. Whereas years ago you just kind of had to guess or sit on the phone for hours with the digital rep at a specific label because you didn't know. And it makes distributing content a lot easier because now as a digital distributor we can pick up a new label, an indie label, or just a label that we didn't have before, and as long as they can send us their data in the DDEX format, we at least know what we're working with. Even within DDEX, sometimes there's variations between labels.
And that's a problem.
Yes.
And that's what happens to people like Neurotic. There's 2 things I hear a lot. Neurotic stood the test of time, been around for more than a decade, already done implementations with the majors. We hear a lot of times, look, I've already done it, why should I change? That's one thing. Second thing is a standard is only a standard if everybody adheres. If you end up with a standard within a standard, then that's a problem. So music industry a lot of times, like herding cats, right, want to carve off and do their own thing. So if people start to do that with a standard, you have a problem. But for new players coming up, huge value. Right? You don't have to do a Warner standard, a Sony standard, an EMI standard, a Universal standard, major indies. It's those protocols, those common links. Think of, again, insurance, travel, banking, without standard protocols.
Second,
sorry.
about DDEX, first time hearing about it. How is that developed? Like, who developed it?
DADC was born out of a couple of previous failed attempts to standardize. I was involved in something called CARAF, C-A-R-A-F, Content Authoring and Rendering Audio Format. It was a bloated standard, dead on delivery. Then there was something called MI3P, where we seek to standardize. Publishers were taking the lead in that one, failed due to politics and a number of reasons. DADC standard has been born out of pain. Pain is what moves people more than anything else. And the pain, a lot of times, has to get so great that you're willing to change, right? Think about your own lives. For me, that motivates me greatly. Exactly. And when it starts to impact revenue, then music label executives tend to listen and move. And we caught the wind with that. The pain was so great. The industry was ready for a standard. Warner Music Group, as an example, you do a deal with Warner Music Group, Ping will tell you, it's a DADC implementation standard. Sony is moving to the same thing, as is Universal, EMI, but may they soon rest in peace. Sad day.
Alison, do you want to chime in a little bit more about some of the deeper data that gets delivered with products, or are you cool?
Well, in terms of, are you talking about metadata about the recording, metadata
as far
about
as
the
the overhead
product?
level data and what other pieces of data? I mean, if you don't, we can jump into the problem side, which I know you really want to get into.
Let's talk about the problem.
Yeah, let's talk about
That's the really interesting one.
And why you guys care.
If you guys are developing protocols for accepting deliveries of content from labels, or if you plan on paying royalties, you should investigate the DADC standard.
Yes.
Because it has a whole lot of different data subsets that talk about all of these subsets of business rules.
I'll talk to each one of you. You guys want to find me afterwards, I'm happy to talk to you.
For hours.
Tell you about DADC as long as you're willing to listen, and same thing on the distribution side separately, so
Right.
I'll be around.
So let's talk a little bit about the problems. If you see the slide up here, one of my favorite movies is Airplane. So I like to always say that I picked the wrong day to stop sniffing glue. And that is really kind of the problems where I think a lot of people who deal with fire hose of information have a huge problem in dealing with some of these very core data issues that still exist from the pre-existing pollution of the pool in some of the metadata. And the inability to create interoperability between the different nodes in the system, right? It's still clunky, it's still not there yet, it's still not fully implemented, it's growing pains of kind of colossal proportions. So, if you look at the slide, there's a couple of different things. Takedowns and rights revocations, rights collisions, artist disambiguation, spoofed and duplicate ISRCs, which we kind of touched on before, so we'll skip over. Incorrect and missing data, and no central authoritative catalog of any of this stuff, right? No ability for anybody to just go in and look and say, hey, who owns what? So, we'll very quickly gloss through these as quickly as we can go. So, Alison, do you want to tell what's the most important issue to you on this slide? Take down the rights revocation.
Well, since I've already tried to bring up ISNI,
Okay, there you go.
I'll bring up
The
ISNI.
stage is yours.
Okay, ISNI is it's also an international standard, and to me it's part of the whole tricortist ISRC, ISNI, ISWC. But ISNI is the International Standard Naming Identifier, and one of the things that it is hopefully setting out to do is artist disambiguation. So, for example, you may have
Lady Gaga.
15, well, let's just say 15 different artists name Jeff Green. So one guy might spell his name Greene. There might be 4 different Jeff Greens that spell their name exactly the same way. So when someone, say, with iTunes goes to search for a particular artist, you have some collisions in terms of the name. So what the International Standard Naming Identifier does is it uniquely identifies each person, maybe with the same name. You might also have an identifying number in Warner's system for an artist, and then say maybe that artist moves to Sony, they're going to have a different identifier in their system. So you don't know for sure. What you want is the consumer to be able to know which Jeff Green they're trying to look at.
You know, going off of that too, it works the other way as well. For example, an artist like the Beastie Boys, over time, we have, you know, in our system received the Beastie Boys, just Beastie Boys, comma, the, Beastie Boys, period, the. I mean, we've got Matchbox 20 with the word 20 and Matchbox 20 with the number 20. So, you know, it's even with the same artist, it can be hard to find all of their albums because they have so many different versions.
You can have various pages for, you know, different, for that, talking about Matchbox, you can have a different page for Matchbox -20 and a different page for Matchbox 20.
Well, we actually had the label.
To normalize that artist title basically it's your problem when you're a developer.
Well, we actually had the label, couldn't find it. We worked directly with a lot of the record labels doing promotions, and they were looking for the new Matchbox 20 album, and they couldn't find it because they didn't even know that it had changed from 20 to the word 20. So, you know, it's a problem everywhere.
It happens a lot.
Yeah. Why don't you have the new Matchbox 20?
Right, so that's the kind of stuff where an identifier, a social security number for an artist or a performer or an entity that performs is also kind of critical, but it's also in the early stages of development, correct? So it's kind of getting there. That's why I say it's a painful work in progress, but it's part of that holy trinity. I guess we can redetermine it then, sort of the ISRC and the ISWC and the ISNI, right? That's the ideal world that we're working very painfully towards.
Who are the registration agencies for ISNI? Like, who would do that?
Google.
The ISNI organization.
ISNI.org?
ISNI, you can Google it, it'll come back to was it in France?
Isn't it
CSAC,
it's actually on that acronym sheet? The website actually may be on that acronym.
Yeah, I
Yes.
checked out the site and it said you have to go through a registration agency.
Oh, right, individual registrars. Actually, one of the conversations at digitalmusic.org was going to become a registrar in the States, right?
It's going to end up with regional registration agencies that field the requests, and rather than everybody and their brother being a registrar, and trying to keep some control, standard oversight, which is something music's not good at.
So involved with DADC important for independent star label, basically is what you're saying?
I would say yes.
I would say extremely, because if you want to have your content distributed digitally, you know that if you have your content in the DADC format, then whoever you go to is already going to be able to accept the DADC format, because that's how they're getting the major labels content.
So if my third party is 88 Weird, would I look into that, or they already have, I don't have to worry about that?
You're done.
Okay.
You're done. They trade in the ERN currency.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So let's talk quickly about some of the other issues that are there. Let's talk about the incorrect and missing data question and what the artist community can do to help that.
Sure.
Any one of you guys?
Get it right from the start. I mean, be involved in that, production recording process. Make sure that information is captured correctly from the start is one thing.
Yeah. Well, and I would say it needs to be captured, because I think what is happening is that there are a number of labels, the way they operate. They're not collecting this metadata during the recording process. They're waiting until the end. The producer tells them, and then they slam together manual documents that end up, and manual documents, not the way to go.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, there's someone somewhere typing your data into a computer that's going to end up on iTunes. And as an artist, you should double check it and make sure that what that person has typed is what you want it to say, because people make mistakes.
Yeah, and unlike the old days where a person in a retail store can put your product into a new bin at the retail level, it's kind of the butterfly flaps its wings. If it's entered wrong one place, it gets transferred to one authority, then another, then another, then another. So I know it seems administrative,
back to the team, right? Back to your team as an artist or a label. Have somebody on your team responsible for that and that cares and that is passionate and has the ability to pull the big red lever to stop the train if it's jacked up. But that it goes back to that, right? To what Jeff said. Have a team, passionate people that are good at what they do and that care about that.
Care about getting it right.
Absolutely. Yeah, right.
Yeah, you know, like what Bill was saying, I mean, the phrase, you know, nothing dies on the internet. Once it's wrong and it's out there, it's going to be wrong for a very long time.
So I guess the next phase of it is really talking about as you guys are ingesting solutions, right? There are a couple of ways to acquire content if you're a startup. One is to go to Ping and her counterparts at all the labels and go and do individual deals and then set up your own infrastructure to ingest content and to do that. And if you're a well-funded company at scale and you have, you know, $1 million to invest in an operational system that will ingest high volumes of content, if that's your business, then that may be something that you want to do because you want to own your entire process. So it's build or buy. The next way that you can get it is to go to an outsourced vendor, like our glorious co-conspirators on this particular event, Neurotic Media, as well as, forgive me, two other members of our organization called MediaNet and 7 Digital, who offer some parallel type services as well. You know, I guess, do you guys want to discuss the build or buy from your perspectives?
Yeah, I mean, you know, one of the things it really boils down to is time and resources. Just, you know, not to get too detailed, but really quickly, we have about 15 terabytes of hard drive space. And then we have all of our content edge cached on a cloud network so that when someone wants to download something, instead of coming from our storage facility here in Atlanta, it comes from a server somewhere that's closer to their location and gets to them much faster. And, you know, that's just a small piece of the technology that we've built. So, you know, it really comes to, do you have the time and the money to build that technology? And do you have relationships with the record labels to go to each record label and get the content? And you have to figure out for your business what makes the most sense.
That's key. What makes the most sense, and weigh the pros and cons, right? You can make it really complex, or you can make it a lot more simple. Just sit down, look at the pros and cons, what your budget is, what you want to accomplish, and then just weigh it out. What we do is when I'm going out soliciting new business from a label, if I want to say, hey, come with us, do distribution through us, we create a dossier on that company, and we learn about that company. We learn about what they do, where they're doing business, who the players are within the organization. You should do a similar thing on this, build versus buy. What do you want to accomplish? Who are the players? Who can you go with if you're going to build that team? What are the costs, the time horizon, versus a buy where you're going to start smaller, can scale up. There are services that do that. Neurotic does that. We mentioned 7 Digital and MediaNet. DADC does that as well. We do global digital distribution services. But look at what you want to do, what you want to accomplish, and ask yourself the common sense questions. Don't lose sight of the common sense.
Going, I guess, to this slide too a little bit. One of the big things to figure out is you need to know exactly what is your business, because for us as Neurotic Media, our business is the content. But for a lot of our clients, their business is more the front end, and they're trying to present a unique way for people to consume music. So they don't really care where they're getting the content. They don't care if they have to, if they're getting it from us or if they're getting it individually from each label. But for us as a digital distributor, we need to have the relationships with the labels, because if we didn't have the content, we wouldn't be a company. As a third party, if we went out of business, knock on wood, but you could always, one of our clients could always get the content from somewhere else still, but we can't. We can only get it from the labels.
Anyone? Cool. All right. Next slide. So basic best practices. Allison, this is all you.
Yeah, this is all you.
Oh.
Yeah, make my life easy.
That's right. That's on the sheet.
Great. I'm glad I have this because I
gonna
can't
drink.
see that. Well, I don't know. In case you guys haven't figured it out yet, I'm extremely passionate about complete metadata, accurate metadata, metadata about recordings. So, and one of the things that I had said early on is that we're with digital, we're getting away from studio credits and liner notes. There are certain reasons why a record company has to have this. For one thing, you know, we have to pay 8 cents for every unit we sell to the AF of M and after unit unions. But I think Georgia is a right-to-work state, as is Tennessee, which is where I'm from. So you don't have to be a member of a union to play on union sessions. Okay, that put aside, really kind of off track. One of the reasons I'm passionate about this kind of metadata, who played on the recorded tracks, what instrument did they play, who was the engineer, where was it recorded, what date was it recorded. This was all, when I was a kid, this information was interesting to me. And when I first started working with it, I wanted to make sure it was that it was, first of all, collected, stored properly, accurate. In terms of the images and videos, same thing. You know, we're still talking about metadata. We want to know where something was filmed. We want to know what day it was filmed on. We want to know who the people are. So the best practice is to collect that, for me, as far as I'm concerned. I collect that very early in the process. I actually compare it. The producer is obligated. He doesn't get paid until he turns in this information. In terms of this same kind of information, I am reconciling those two things. And then it gets reconciled to the actual master itself, what's on the master. That, I see, is the best practice for that kind of information. And we do videos, photos, recordings, and all of those are assets that a record company can sell. But without metadata, it's going to be tough to sell.
So jump in, bringing it back to why you care, right? If you're a service, if you're a digital service, you want to differentiate yourself from any number of other services that are doing the similar or same thing. If you have this type of information available to consumers, lyrics, liner notes, etc., those value add components, it gives consumers a reason to go to your site versus another site. Rabid fans, artists have fans, some more rabid than others. Those rabid fans, they want to consume everything possible about that group or that artist. So again, if your service offers things like that, it gives those consumers a reason to gravitate towards you. If you're a performer, you're able to provide those things. That's how it's important to you as well, and gives you a reason to care about that stuff.
I don't have anything to add. They did a very good job.
Well, I mean, the thing is if you collect all of this information that has to do with a particular recording, and we have services, companies that provide this information. I don't call it value added myself because to me it's critical. But yeah, value added. But the thing is you can use some of this data to discover other music. Let's say a particular bass player on a recording. It's like, I love the way this guy plays bass. What else has he played bass on? Discover new music. Follow through with what really rings your bell, you know.
You have something like the Sound City movie that just came out, right? And I don't know if any of you guys have seen it, but it's really an amazing documentary about a recording studio, and really the console that recorded so many great records. if I'm there and I want to say, holy shit, I really love to hear everything that was recorded at Sound City, there's no way to follow that breadcrumb through digital music services right now because a lot of the information is missing or lost or not provided in the supply chain, right? So we have to curate this information, and there's some entities, Alison's doing it internally at a large company. There are some other more minor initiatives at some of the majors to handle this stuff. It's very sporadic in the indie community because it's self-provided and most people don't think about filling out those optional fields when they do their little online distribution deals. But it's all critical to the next generation of music products, and again, for that discoverability. And so, again, we just encourage everybody to kind of do that. And with respect to how things are typed in, and the way you should type things in, another quick self-serving message, we created a style guide that's based on a collection of all of the digital storefronts and how they agree that artists should be presenting their data. So that's available as a download on the digitalmusic.org website. It's the music style guide. So that's something that you can download and find out there.
From a quick question, from a label standpoint, would a company like Next Big Sound be something that would be good to relate to people?
Sorry?
Next Big Sound, are you familiar with that?
Yeah. I mean, Next Big Sound is a huge analytics platform that ingests a lot of different pieces of metadata, and they combine it to provide a dashboard for you to analyze what's happening with your career. They have enterprise deals with some of the larger companies who feed in some of their own sales data to really get a very accurate picture of what's moving the needle for what they're doing. So yeah, that's part of the data equation, and the big data analytics piece of this is kind of not what we're specifically talking about here. It's very critical. Maybe that's an opportunity for an analytics kind of class at the next iteration of this. But it's all going to be powered by identifiers. It's all going to be powered by what we're talking about here, right? It's all going to be powered by everything that we discussed here because this is the basics, and this is kind of the head of the snake.
Yeah, I mean, if all this stuff isn't right, then you never can even get to the analytics piece because there's nothing to analyze if you have the wrong data across your song on 5 different websites.
Cool. So I mean, we've already done some questions. So if anybody has additional questions, we're going to wrap up so you guys can get something to eat and don't pass out. But if there are any some additional questions, you want to raise your hand or come to the.
There's one in the back.
One at the mic.
Everybody wants to come to the front or raise your hand, it's fine, shout, that's totally fine.
I do have a question for you out of time. Bram from Indie Hitmaker. We live in the world of UPCs, but we're very interested in this. Which of these registries should the artists make sure that they go and get on, and is it possible for the artist to do it directly? Can you talk really quickly on that?
With respect to registering your ISRC, you can go to the RAAA and get an ISRC code yourself. That means you will have your own specific code for your, like I ran an indie label.
It's easy.
For 15 years.
I was talking more about like DADC and ISNI and these.
With DADC, with Registry, with ISNI, it's very easy to go to. With DADC, you download the spec and you just build your system.
So any artist, anybody can go to
Artists, individuals can join DADC. The cost is really, really low. We kept the barrier, want to keep the barriers to entry low.
Cost nothing.
Implementation costs nothing. The information on the specs on the site. DADC.net, check it out. I can give you information. I should know the membership rates, but they're really, really reasonable.
And if you want to get involved with governance.
Yeah. So you can watch from outside in. You can participate. We work by consortium to create the spec, to move the spec forward based on the needs of the business. There's a guy in the back that has a question up, or hand up.
Because getting an ISRC code is so essential to getting your track ready and everything, why do you feel that the IFPI doesn't work with copyright companies to kind of, I don't think, collaborate together?
It's politics.
Yeah.
They're trying to deal with that.
Yeah.
There are a lot of old wounds from a lot of old fiefdoms.
Exactly.
So the jousting between legacy executives who have grudges against each other from 40 years ago still happen.
Yeah,
so
sadly.
That is sadly the case of where it is. So overcoming that is the job of everybody in this room to assemble the pitchforks and torches and kind of
It's like voting. If you don't vote, you shouldn't get to complain. So participate and get your voice heard.
And part of, again, self-serving, but being part of trade associations to help rattle the cage,
Yes.
that's part of what we do, right? That's part of what the trade association job is to gather the villagers to storm the castle.
Yes.
How does this all these identifiers, how does this translate into the ad space and TV and like placement for it?
With respect to how things are done, talking very specifically about synchronization, when you use an ISRC, that stuff is passed along to the entities that handle synchronization. It's how the identifiers are licensed, and then it's passed along to the Q sheet, the people who handle the Q sheet, to go to ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC. That's theoretically how it works. In practicality, there's a lot of friction in the process that happens, and the errors in that data right now account for a 30% error rate in the way that rates are paid to people who synchronize, because Q sheet data is often horrible. There's a company called Wire, QWIRE Holdings, that is attempting to solve this process, and I will also say that I am an advisor to that company, so that is why I know exactly what the process is.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
So for the independent, let's say some of these people are independent labels like this gentleman here, and they just want to help not only their existing artists, but new artists distribute their music without going through iTunes, or excuse me, without going through TuneCore or other aggregators. What's the best method to do that? Are there other?
Keep it simple. Talk to Todd. Talk to myself. You can do a web search on digital distributors, and any number of names will come back.
Which I have.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So again, go through the process of what the needs of those artists are. Do you want local delivery or global? Right. Global, right? And who has those presence to get you to that global distribution, that global footprint, to make sure that you're in the markets and the stores that are relevant to your artists, right?
If you're a French artist, you need to be in Deezer.
Right, exactly. Exactly. And services that cater to that type of genre, right? Genre specific. You would never, if you're in a dance or one of those offshoots, you gotta be in certain stores, right? Beatport, Juno, DJ Download, right? There's a number of services.
I would say that we're happy to answer more questions, but I know that food is out there, so any of you who are packaged.
Thank you for hanging in.
Yeah. Come on up and we'll answer